this is a rapid overview of this methodology, and it's very basic, but then of course I will be happy to accommodate any question you may have in relation specifically to risk information system and Earth observation. I just want to make sure that you see the screen. Yes, I think, okay. Everybody can, yeah, okay, good. Just stop me if you no longer have access to the PowerPoint. So how does it work first, CADRI? It's a facility for countries to access expertise in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. But it's really very broad. It cuts across a very wide range of socioeconomic sectors and also a field of expertise. And we draw this expertise from the entire UN system, but way beyond the UN system. So it's a partnership primarily between the IFRC and the UN system. But you don't see here that there are many non-governmental organizations that are engaged actually in the delivery of expertise. We also use the EOTEC mechanism, so it's actually very broad. Now, what is of interest to us is really to share with you some aspects of the tool and methodology that has been developed by the CADRI partners together, but also in consultation with regional economic commissions. I mean, it's been and various partners a long time ago. So this diagnosis tool, it's not digitalized, but before we go into the tool, I would like to stress that much more than a tool, it is a methodology. It's very, and I think what governments have appreciated in the tool, in the method, has been really like the approach, how we actually roll out the tool. And it's much more important than the tool itself in some ways. The fact that, for instance, CADRI is government-led. Any capacity diagnosis falls under the leadership of the government. It's actually a tool that is rolled out by the government with the support of the CADRI experts when required. So that's really the specificity of this tool. It's not like an externally driven diagnosis. It's a government diagnosis with some support from in-country experts and sometimes regional or international experts. So that's really more important than the tool itself. The second point that I would like to make on the methodology, yes, it's very participative. So actually any experts, any organization, depending on their presence at country level or in the region, can be engaged. But it's also, it's very inclusive. And as much as possible, we engage civil society actors and private sector stakeholders in the rollout of the diagnosis. Now, when it comes to the tool, it's in essence a questionnaire, a question bank, which can be customized, really depending on the government interest and the scope they want to give to the diagnosis. So what you see here, the value added of this tool is that it touches on many sectors. It's possible for the government to decide, I'm going to look at the state of country systems, country capacities, to manage risk in, for instance, the health, agriculture, and tourism sector. But another government would request, I would like to look at the WASH sector, the environment sector, whatever. It can also be a cultural heritage, exposure to risk. So it really depends. It can be totally customized when it comes to the number of sectors that are looked at. It's also, it can be customized by hazard as well. So there are hazard specific questions for drought or for floods or for earthquakes. So it also enables the government to see, okay, what type of enhancement can be made specifically in relation to, for instance, seismic risk management. But of course, it also promotes a multi-hazard risk management approach, obviously. And then, yeah, it can be customized in many ways. So that's really the main thing to understand. It's a very, very comprehensive tool. You can end up spending a year doing a diagnosis if you were to apply all the indicators, etc. But you can also decide to reduce the scope, of course. So in the end, the diagnosis and planning tool can be used for very different purposes. You can decide to look at the state of country systems to manage disaster risk. You can decide to only focus on preparedness or on climate change adaptation. And of course, it's also possible to use the tool. Don't know why there is this, but specifically to risk as risk information systems. So it's possible to have a diagnosis only focusing on risk information systems across sectors, multi-hazards. Well, how do we understand risk? How do we access information? How is it available, etc. The use of the tool can, of course, be many. The application of such diagnosis. Sometimes some governments, they want to use it specifically to support a very specialized exercise, like developing or updating a national contingency plan. But sometimes the use of the tool is much broader. It can be to support the identification of risk entry point in a national development plan or in a national growth strategy. Can also be used, of course, to support UN system programming. Now, when we look at capacities, it's very broad. So we have a lot of questions that relate to governance. A lot of indicators that relate to how do you actually implement the governance framework. So what are the skills, competencies, methodologies, etc., SOPs that exist. There is a whole section that relates to financing. How is financing available, public and private financing to support risk reduction in the country. There is knowledge, of course, and availability and access to technology and equipment. So when we look at risk information, if we were to do a diagnosis of risk information system, of course, we would not only look at knowledge. It will still look at all of those elements. The diagnosis we select some questions in governance that relate to, I don't know, it can be, open access data. I mean, it can be many things. If we look at implementation, financing, knowledge, and technology. So, sorry, I know I don't have too much time. So when you access the tool, you have a question bank, and you can actually, basically, you can screen the question. You can be very selective. So you can decide to look only at risk information and then governance. You can also decide to look at risk information specifically in relation to the agriculture and food security sector, or you can decide to select many sectors. So it's really the key message here is that it's totally customizable. And again, the tool is used to facilitate a dialogue with country stakeholders. The dialogue is facilitated by the government. So yeah, again, the scope can be very broad and the scope can be also very narrow. Now, there are a lot of questions that relate to GIS or Earth observation. Most of those questions actually, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but for you, most of those questions have been actually designed by WMO. So many of them are extracted from the existing WMO capacity diagnosis tool in relation to capacity diagnosis of national hydrometeorological systems. But it's much broader than the WMO diagnosis tool. And again, here, most of those questions are extracted from the generic module. But if you select the environment module, then you will have questions that relate to application of Earth observation to services, if you want, to environment or to tourism or to agriculture. So it's like those are some examples. We look at, in general, are equipment and technology available? So this is really we will have like a high level question, and then under it we will have many technical questions that we call the first order question or second order question that enable us to actually assess is the technology and equipment available, are technology and equipment available, or are they used? So those are two very different questions, and then there are many other questions that relate to that. So for instance, when it comes to GIS, we will look at how GIS data is collected. Is it interoperable? How is it being stored? What is the legal framework for GIS? Is there a GIS capacity building strategy in place across government? Are there sectors that make better use of GIS, etc.? So there are really a lot of indicators that can be used. And again, the government can really select which questions they would like to use, government or any partner. So then, I think you get the message, but we're looking at, is it being used or to strengthen, for instance, the delivery of social services, right? Is it used to optimize disaster preparedness or emergency response? So you can really decide on the scope. Complementary to the tool, there is also, you can also access on the CADRI website the e-catalog of different type of modules that are offered by UN agency, but also the IFRC system and GNDR, so it's much broader than UN agencies. And you can find, for instance, this so this one, I think, is a module on geospatial information technology. There are many different modules covering many different, I think there are 170 modules, and you can search them by keywords. And this is our catalog of training modules and resources. Now, sorry. I really cannot go to the next slide. It seems, yes. So to date, the capacity diagnosis methodology, it's the best known in terms of, this is really the main service that is being requested by governments. There are many other services available, but this one is really the best known. That's why we have put so much energy and enthusiasm in the delivery of this joint capacity diagnosis tool. So you see here there have been 43 countries that have submitted this type of request to use the tool or the methodology. In the world, many of them in the Africa region, but more and more in the Asia-Pacific region. We just deployed a mission to Mongolia 2 weeks ago to support the government of Mongolia. And I think next week, there is another capacity diagnosis starting in Zambia. And I want to end this presentation to really encourage you first to connect to the website and ask access to the question bank if you are interested, to see how you could make use of this tool customize it for your own use. So it's accessible to government, but it's accessible, of course, to any partner. It's a public, somehow public domain tool that is made available by the CADRI partners. So you can log in. Please feel free to access it and use it and play with it. That's one message. The second message, and the last one, is that you are also we are always looking for experts to deploy, especially actually in your field, in your area of expertise. So maybe we could also actually share when we get a country request, share it with your group to see if we can mobilize expertise from your group. Of course, we count a lot on WMO because WMO is a CADRI partner. But of course, beyond WMO, we are always eager to expand the network of CADRI experts. So if you want to become a CADRI expert, be trained on the methodology and being deployed, please reach out to the CADRI Secretariat. Thank you very much.